My brother used my trauma for internet clout, so I turned his followers against him. They say betrayal hurts most when it comes from the ones who know your scars. But what they never tell you is how much it destroys you when someone uses those scars for entertainment. I'm Jessica Steve, and if you had asked me 2 years ago who I trusted more than anyone in the world, I would have said my older brother, Eli. Without hesitation. He was my protector when we were kids, the one who made shadow puppets on the ceiling when I had panic attacks, the one who held my hand during our parents' divorce, the one who swore he'd never let anyone hurt me again. We weren't just siblings, we were survivors. That's what I believed. What a stupid, naive belief. I didn't grow up with fairy tales. Our father was a ghost, even when he was in the room. Cold eyes, colder hands. Our mother tried, I think, in her own damaged way. But survival in our house meant silence. Eli and I survived together, back to back, building our own universe of whispered jokes and flashlight promises under blankets. Trauma made us close. Too close, maybe. He knew every detail of my pain. He knew what made my breath hitch. He knew the nightmares I still had in my 20s, the ones I never told anyone else. So when Eli started building a YouTube channel, Real Talk with E, I thought it was a good thing. He was finally healing, maybe even helping others heal. His tagline was, "Pain becomes power when you share it." His videos blew up fast. He talked about mental health, emotional resilience, family dysfunction. I was proud of him. He had found purpose in our pain until I realized it wasn't our pain he was talking about. It was mine. He didn't use my name at first, just vague stories, hints, someone I loved once, and then he'd drop exact details of things I'd only ever told him in confidence. About the night I locked myself in the closet during one of Dad's drunken rages. About the first panic attack I ever had on a school bus. About the therapist I secretly saw in college after a breakdown. Word for word, he turned my private moments into content. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe I was being paranoid. But then he posted a video titled, "My Sister's Struggle with Self-Worth." No more hiding, no more vague pronouns. He called me his inspiration and shared my story like it was some heroic fable, twisting my pain into paragraphs that made him look like the savior. I remember watching that video in silence, feeling my heart cave in on itself. The way he spoke, soft voice, heartfelt expression, teary eyes, it was theater. But the worst part, the comments, thousands of people calling him brave, telling him what a great brother he was, that they wished they had someone like Eli. I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip the screen from my laptop. But I just sat there, cold and numb, reading every line of praise he soaked up while I stayed invisible. He never asked, never warned me, never even apologized. And when I confronted him, he smiled, actually smiled, like I was overreacting. "Jessica Steve, relax. People love the message. You should be proud. Your story is helping others." My story. He was building a brand, a following, a career, all on the back of my brokenness, and in the twisted eyes of the world, he was the hero. The brave brother who stood by his sister. I was the background, the shadow, the suffering he spotlighted to build his stage. That was the moment something inside me snapped, not in rage, not even in sadness. It was something quieter, heavier. Resolve. He stole my story, my suffering, my name. I wasn't going to scream, I wasn't going to beg, but I was going to make sure everyone who followed him would see the truth. Not just about me, but about him. Because what Eli didn't know was that I had quietly documented everything. The lies, the manipulation, the staged, authentic videos, the way he rehearsed vulnerability like it was a monologue, and I was done being the silent sister in his script. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of his downfall. They say the camera never lies, but my brother Eli had turned lying into an art form, and the lens into his most powerful weapon. After I confronted him and he brushed me off with that smug influencer smile, I knew I couldn't win by screaming the truth. No one listens to the girl crying in the background. They only hear the one holding the mic. And Eli? He was holding the mic, the stage, the lights, and the applause. So I went quiet. Not out of fear, but because silence is where power gathers. While Eli filmed raw confessionals about my trauma, I watched. I took notes. I recorded timestamps. I made folders. Hours of footage where he exaggerated, fabricated, and even reenacted things that never happened. It was like watching someone forge my diary page by page. He called it inspirational content. I called it theft. But what made it worse? He was getting sponsorships, therapy apps, book deals, invitations to speak at mental health conferences. People were paying him to talk about the panic attacks I survived, the abuse I endured, the scars I never showed the world. And he never once asked if I was okay with it, because he didn't care. Eli didn't see me as a sister anymore. He saw me as material. And I realized something in those quiet nights, sitting alone with my laptop, watching him cash in on my suffering. If he could build a following on a lie, then I could dismantle it with the truth, but not by shouting, by showing. So I started building my own platform, quietly, an anonymous TikTok account. No name, no face, just stories, real ones, short clips, audio overlays, the voice of a sister whose trauma was being used for someone else's fame. I shared fragments, small enough to protect my identity, raw enough to feel real. And the response? Immediate. People resonated. This happened to me too. Thank you for saying what I couldn't. Whoever you are, you're not alone. I wasn't alone anymore. I was building my own army, but I wasn't just planning to vent. I was planning to expose. I created a digital trail, screenshots of messages Eli sent me, drafts of scripts he'd written where he exaggerated my pain for drama, clips of him rehearsing tears in front of the mirror before recording. It wasn't enough to accuse him. I needed to show people who he really was. And then, he gave me the perfect weapon. He uploaded a video titled, "The Night My Sister Tried to End Her Life." Except I never had. Yes, I'd had breakdowns, panic attacks, nights where I couldn't breathe, but I never attempted. That story was pure fiction. His voice trembled. His eyes glossed over. He even held up an old childhood photo of us, acting like he had just pulled it from a dusty drawer. The comments exploded. "You're such a strong brother. Thank you for being her protector. She's lucky to have you." I nearly threw my phone across the room. That was the line he crossed. He didn't just steal my pain, he rewrote it. So I made the decision. I was going to reveal everything, not just to a few strangers online, but to his audience, his fans, his sponsors, his world. And when I did, I wouldn't need to scream, because the truth, when shown clearly enough, doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be undeniable. This was no longer about revenge. This was about reclaiming my voice. And the spotlight? It was about to shift. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But mine, it was crafted in silence, layered with precision, and served under the spotlight my brother had stolen from me. The night Eli posted that video, the night my sister tried to end her life, was the night I stopped being a victim of his lies. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was defamation dressed up as compassion, a fiction painted with faux tears and heavy music. I watched him perform my pain like it was his most powerful monologue. He looked into the camera, voice trembling, eyes glistening, and said, "I found her on the bathroom floor, and I knew I had to be strong for both of us." There was only one problem. It never happened. That scene, that trauma, that wasn't mine. It wasn't real. It was a script, a story he had fabricated to harvest sympathy clicks and applause from strangers. And the worst part, they believed him. All of them. Thousands of comments poured in, each one cutting deeper than the last. "You're such a good brother. She's lucky to have someone like you." This made me cry. Stay strong. I wasn't lucky. I was used. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at my laptop screen, numb. Then, I opened a blank document, and I began writing every lie, every exaggerated detail, every manipulated memory. I wrote it all down like a confession. Only it wasn't mine. It was his. I gathered screenshots, messages, notes from years ago when Eli would ask, "Remind me what happened that night," just for context. Then he'd twist it into something darker, something more marketable. He didn't care what the truth was. He only cared what would trend. So I started editing. I created a video, anonymous, direct, and raw. My voice disguised but steady, narrating the truth behind his most viral lies. I included screenshots, timelines, side-by-side comparisons of his claims versus reality. I never showed my face, never used his name. But the dots were easy to connect. I titled it, "The Truth Behind the Trauma Content You Love." And I uploaded it at midnight. I didn't expect it to explode. By 8 a.m., the video had over 100,000 views. By noon, it was trending on TikTok and being re-uploaded across Reddit, YouTube, and Instagram. People started asking questions. Is this about Eli Monroe? Is he the one pretending to be the victim? Wait, this doesn't add up. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The internet was doing what it does best. Investigating, digging, turning praise into suspicion. Suddenly, people weren't just commenting support. They were analyzing. His followers began picking apart his timeline, noticing inconsistencies, asking why he had never shown any real proof. The charm was cracking. The mask was slipping. And Eli? He panicked. The next day, he posted a video titled, "Addressing the Recent Accusations." But this time, there were no tears, no trembling voice, just a shaky attempt at damage control. He said the story was inspired by real events, that he had never meant to hurt anyone, that storytelling is powerful, and sometimes you have to dramatize to make people listen. That word, more dramatize, was his undoing because the truth doesn't need dramatizing, and survivors don't need storytellers. They need space, they need respect, and he had violated both. That video, it tanked. Comments turned brutal. So you lied? You exploited someone else's trauma for likes? You don't deserve this platform. Sponsors pulled out. Brands unfollowed. One by one, his so-called allies distanced themselves, replacing hashtags of support with statements like, "We do not condone the misuse of mental health narratives." It wasn't revenge, it was justice, but it didn't feel triumphant, at least not right away, because behind every viral tweet, every unsubscriber was still a wound. A betrayal that wouldn't fade just because the world finally saw him clearly. Still, I had my voice back, and this time, it wasn't being filtered through his scripts or staged for his followers. It was mine. I didn't out him by name. I didn't have to. I told my story, and it spoke louder than any performance he could ever give. They used to applaud him for being brave. Now, they saw the truth, and I was just getting started. There's a moment right before a structure falls, when the beams creak, the foundation trembles, and the walls seem to hold their breath. That's where Eli was now, right on the edge. And I was the wind pushing gently against his house of lies. In the days after my anonymous video went viral, silence fell over Eli's world like a thick fog. His feed, once a constant flood of choreographed empathy and curated smiles, went still. No sunrise quotes, no fake vulnerable stories, no sponsored skincare routines over melancholy piano music. Just nothing. But the silence spoke louder than any post he could have made. The internet smelled blood. Reddit threads dissected every story he'd ever shared. Fans began rewatching his old videos with a new lens, picking apart his body language, noting the calculated pauses, the inconsistencies in his timelines. A girl he once featured in a video about self-harm came forward. Then another and another, each of them said the same thing. He twisted our pain into content. He had messaged them under the guise of mental health awareness, asking them to share their stories, promising anonymity, then spinning their trauma into plot points for likes. And suddenly, the man who once built his brand on being rock, the internet's soft brother, was exposed as a thief of truths. Meanwhile, I stayed hidden. I didn't need to step into the light. The story had grown legs of its own. And my healing wasn't in their applause. It was in my control. For the first time, I wasn't a shadow in my brother's narrative. I was the author of my own. Then, the phone calls started. First from my mother. "Whatever's happening with Eli, don't make it worse," she said, voice tight with worry, but not for me. Of course, she was always like that. Growing up, Eli could wreck my things, lie straight to her face, and she'd still say, "Boys will be boys. Don't be so sensitive, Jessica Steve." Now that his world was burning, she wanted me to bring water, but I had none left to give. Next came Eli. He didn't call. He texted, one sentence. "We need to talk, please." I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. He didn't apologize, didn't even ask if I was okay. All he wanted was damage control. A patch job on a brand collapsing under the weight of its own hypocrisy. So I didn't reply. Instead, I watched as his subscriber count nosedived. Sponsorships terminated. Collaborators posted their own "I had no idea" videos. A charity he was affiliated with issued a public statement cutting ties, citing exploitation of survivor stories. And then came the real breaking point, a live stream, his desperate Hail Mary. He sat in his studio, the same one he had filmed so many of my stolen stories in. But this time, there was no soft lighting, no sad music, just Eli, tired, unshaven, scrambling to salvage what was left. "I just wanted to help," he said, voice cracking. "I know I made mistakes, but this witch hunt, it's gone too far. My mental health is suffering. I feel like everyone's turned on me." I almost laughed. The irony was painful. He'd built an empire exploiting trauma, and now he was trying to weaponize his own when the tables turned. But this time, no one was buying it. The chat exploded. "You never helped anyone but yourself. You're not the victim. Apologize to your sister." And that was when he cracked. "I tried to protect her," he shouted suddenly, eyes wild. "She's fragile. She couldn't handle the truth." The mask dropped. The chat paused for a second and then erupted. I didn't need to say anything. He had just told the world exactly who he was. The next day, I received an anonymous email from a content creator I admired. A woman who had once been manipulated by Eli into a false collaboration. She said, "Your silence was louder than his screams. Thank you." It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclamation, my story, my voice, my truth. And Eli? He wasn't just losing followers. He was losing the illusion. People weren't looking at him with admiration anymore. They were looking at him with recognition. They finally saw what I had always known. He wasn't the hero of my story. He was the villain. And I had just taken the pen back. They say healing isn't linear. I used to think that meant some days would hurt more than others. But what I've learned? Healing isn't just about pain. It's about permission, the quiet, deliberate decision to stop bleeding for people who never noticed you were cut. After Eli's collapse, my world didn't magically stitch itself back together. There were no grand apologies, no dramatic confrontations, no satisfying closure, just silence, and the slow echo of my own breath as I reclaimed space in a life that had always felt borrowed. I spent weeks off social media. I deleted every app, turned off notifications, and poured myself into something real: wood, paint, and soil. The backyard of my childhood home had been left to rot. Overgrown vines choked the garden beds, and broken furniture rusted beneath the trees. But it was mine now, a blank canvas. So I picked up tools I hadn't touched in years and built something, just for me, a bench, a small one, nothing special. But it held my weight. And that was more than I could say for the people I once trusted. Each day, I carved, sanded, planted. I didn't post about it. I didn't share updates or seek praise. I just lived. Until one evening, an old friend reached out. Not someone from Eli's orbit. Not a follower, a real friend. Mara. She'd seen the anonymous video and said simply, "I knew it was you, and I'm proud of you." We talked for hours, about the past, the way Eli would twist our truths into entertaining tragedies, how even back then we felt like characters in a story he was telling without our consent. Mara had her own story to share, and it was heartbreaking. But what bonded us wasn't just pain, it was power. We were no longer silenced. That night, I had a new idea, not for revenge, for purpose. I started a small online space, not under my name, not with fanfare, but as a safe digital refuge, a place for people who'd had their voices stolen by influencers, institutions, even family. It wasn't about exposing anyone. It was about letting people be heard on their own terms. No names, no followers, just truth. Within a week, it was flooded. Survivors, whistleblowers, quiet warriors who were done being side characters. I didn't speak much in that space. I listened. And when I did share, I didn't tell my brother's story. I told mine, not the version he fed to his followers, not the filtered edits, the real one, full of silence, screams, confusion, and ultimately, clarity. And it resonated. Not because I was special, but because I was honest. Eli tried once more to reach out, through our mother. A carefully worded letter, begging for forgiveness, blaming the internet, the culture, his mental spiral. I read it, and then I burned it. I didn't need his words anymore. What I needed was this: a life untouched by his narrative, a world where I wasn't somebody's content, where I could love myself without being edited for sympathy. I look at the bench I built every morning. It's imperfect, slightly crooked, the stain uneven, but it's mine, and every time I sit on it, I remind myself of the woman who built it, broken once, but never again. This was my story now, and no one, not my brother, not the internet, gets to tell it but me. They say the internet forgets nothing, but I've learned something deeper. The truth, when told right, doesn't need to be viral. It just needs to be real. It had been months since Eli's fall from grace. His sponsorships vanished like mist. His millions of followers cut in half. The sympathy act he tried to spin never landed, because no one believed a storyteller who finally ran out of other people's pain to profit from. He tried everything to win them back. He posted staged apologies with trembling lips and overproduced lighting. He wrote captions about growth and mental health and learning to be better, but none of it hit the same, because the person he used to climb to the top was finally speaking. And I wasn't speaking in hashtags, I was speaking in truth. I never showed my face, not on the account, not in interviews. That was intentional. The world didn't need another sad-eyed survivor begging for justice. They needed someone who took their pain and built something stronger. And quietly, I did. The online community I'd created, born from trauma, blossomed. It became more than stories. It became a movement, a network of people reclaiming their voices, sharing anonymously, healing together. The platform was small but powerful, not clickbait, not performative. Authentic. And for the first time, I didn't feel like content. I felt like a creator. Eli tried to silence it. He claimed defamation, threatened legal action, sent cease and desist to anyone he suspected was behind the account. He even hired a PR firm to trace the source of the smear campaign. But what he never understood was this: you can't sue the truth. And you definitely can't sue an army of voices finally refusing to be quiet. I had documentation, emails, recordings, screenshots of how he used my therapy sessions as scripts, footage of him mocking me between takes, even contracts he forged in my name for brand deals that exploited my trauma. I'd kept everything. Not for revenge, for redemption. One quiet morning, I submitted it all to an investigative journalist who specialized in influencer exploitation. No payment, no credit, just the truth. The article went viral, but this time, not for Eli, for the movement, for the anonymous survivors, for the community built on honesty, not ego. People recognized his voice in those leaked clips. They saw the receipts. They remembered the tears he performed for views and realized they'd been complicit in clapping for cruelty. And suddenly, no one was laughing. His platform crumbled. Not with an explosion, but a slow, public erosion. He was no longer the funny, tragic storyteller. He was the villain who built a brand off someone else's pain. My pain. And now I live quietly, I still build. Not just online, but with my hands. I teach workshops, help trauma survivors create with wood, clay, earth, something they can touch, hold, and say. I made this. I don't tell them my full story unless they ask, because my story is mine where I are part now, not viral, not monetized. Mine. People still ask if I regret exposing him, if it was worth it, and I tell them this. Sometimes, justice isn't about punishment. It's about finally being heard. By yourself. I was never trying to destroy my brother. I was trying to rebuild myself, one brick of truth at a time, and I did. Because this time, I was the architect of my voice, of my story, of my life. If you've made it this far, thank you. This wasn't just a story of betrayal. It was a story of reclamation, of finding power in pain, of turning silence into strength. My brother thought he could control the narrative, that I'd stay quiet while he rose to fame on the ruins of my life. But what he didn't realize is that I wasn't a victim. I was the author. And when I picked up the pen, I didn't just write a comeback, I wrote a legacy. If you've ever been silenced, underestimated, or turned into someone else's stepping stone, know this: your truth matters, your voice matters, and you are not alone. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had your pain exploited or found power in speaking up? I want to hear your story. Let me know where you're watching from, and if this story struck a nerve, hit that like button, and subscribe to join me for more stories of betrayal, justice, and ultimate revenge. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't rage. It's rebuilding and letting the truth echo louder than any lie ever could. This was Ultimate Revenge.